My name is Brendan Bluette. I'm the senior sound designer at Wargaming Chicago. I handle all the sound for the Xbox 360 and Xbox One version of World of Tanks. I have a pretty extensive background in audio, pro audio. I've been working in the games industry for the last 10 years. I've been working at Wargaming on World of Tanks since June 2014, so just over about a year now. I've had a really pretty lively career in music over the last 15 years or so. I've toured internationally as a musician. I've worked as a professional live sound engineer. I'm still active in that. I work at a club called Reggie's on the South Side. I get to work with cool bands like Megadeth and Anthrax, King's X, Dillinger Escape Plan, stuff like that. And in my day-to-day, I end up working on World of Tanks. The past 10 years, I've shipped lots of games as a sound designer. There's a few of them up here. Everything from America's Army with the Department of Defense all the way down to Go Diego Go Safari Rescue for Nickelodeon. So I've touched on a handful of different things, between recording tanks and doing sound for metal bands and making slide whistle sound effects for children's games. I've covered the whole gamut. I've been really obsessed with audio for a really long time. Since 1992, probably when I was about 12, I started stealing tape decks from friends' parents and daisy chaining them together and trying to figure out how to make weird sounds happen. I started out pre-digital sound, really. I was working with tape and kind of digital magneto-optical formats before computers were even handling sound. So I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm really excited to be working on World of Tanks. It's given me a lot of really crazy opportunities. I think he mentioned before that we rolled out a bunch of updates for the Xbox One. This is exclusive content for the Xbox One and Xbox 360. It was a year of production. We went out and recorded. We recorded tanks. We recorded explosions. We recorded impacts and ricochets. We replaced all the ambient world sound in the game. So everything that's on the 360 and Xbox One as of the 2.0 release is something that's unique to the consoles. It's not something that we share with the PC. Though we do share our source material that we record, we've kind of massaged it and implemented it in a totally different way. I just want to touch really quick on the discipline of sound design so that we can kind of dispel a couple myths about how the whole thing works. A lot of people, especially when Fury came out, started saying, well, why doesn't the game sound like Fury? We want it to be more like Fury. It's so exciting and emotional when you hear these explosions, but at the same time in Fury, you have to remember that Brad Pitt's hanging out next to a dude that's blasting away on a 50 caliber machine gun and having a conversation with the guy right next to him. And not to mention that they're riding around blazing on a Sherman tank, and I don't know if anyone here has had any experience around actual tanks, but they are cacophonously loud. You can't talk to the guy next to you. It's so loud that the inside of a T-55 is louder than the loudest rock concert I've ever experienced in my life. Your ears are ringing the instant you get out of there. So the discipline of game sound design and film are kind of different beasts because the film guys have a script and they get to say, in this moment, we want to make sure that you hear the voiceover more than the machine gun. And in this moment, we want to make sure that these explosions are the loudest thing. So they get to mix it because there's a script, and that's the way that they make the movie. But in games, you guys get to control everything. The user determines when they fire their gun. They the game also, what the other users do determine what voiceover you're going to be hearing. So we have to process things in a little bit more of an elegant way because we don't know what's going to happen. So we have to create these kind of procedural, real-time effects that kind of pump the volume of certain channels. We use sidechain compression in our games. Some other games use a kind of more code-based thing, but if there's any pro audio nerds out there, basically we set a threshold. When a sound goes above a certain volume, it says turn all these other sounds down. And we stack those things up on top of each other. So the gun makes the world ambience quieter. And the voiceover makes the gun and the world ambience quieter. So if you're shooting your gun and there's voiceover happening, you get to hear everything. But you only hear the most important things, like the voice messages and the gun, because guns are cool, right? So we're going to talk real quick about all the different recording projects that went into the update for Xbox One release, which also, like I said, rolled out to the 360. The platforms have content parity, but the actual audio decoding process is different on the two different platforms. The way that sounds in memory are handled is different, so you do get a kind of different fidelity. It's a little bit more hi-fi. Obviously, on the Xbox One, we've got a lot more memory to work with. But I'm going to show a quick video here that kind of just touches on a handful of the things that we did. And you get to see kind of a couple of the tanks that we recorded, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If my computer will start working for me. Here we go. Is 6 still muted? Ah, there you go, we're good. This is from a session we did in Belarus, out at a spot called Stalin's Line. We recorded a T-55. This is something that we did with the PC team, a collaborative effort. Now, in a minute here, we're going to hear this this Abbot turning, and I want you guys to know that if I made the tanks in the game sound like this, that your wives and girlfriends would run for the hills. You want to turn this up just a smidge? So this is where that brings in that realism versus what gamers want kind of thing. I used to have a little bit more hair. Cool, yeah, so there's just a couple snippets there of, like the projects that we did, Like the first part of our kind of effort was a 4-day trip that I went and collaborated with the Seattle team in the Pacific Northwest. We recorded a bunch of tannerite explosions. There was a little clip there. You could see I was like hanging out in the rainforest in the Pacific Northwest. So what we ended up doing is going, like, I don't know if you guys are any firearms enthusiasts here. They make this binary explosive called tannerite. You can buy, I don't know what the legality of it in Illinois is, but in Washington State, as long as you're not like some sort of convicted criminal, you can just go to the store and buy this stuff. So we just went and gave them $1,000, said, give us $1,000 worth of tannerite, and we went and mixed it into the explosive containers in way larger volumes than it was suggested. It said, don't ever do this, but we did it anyways. We had one of our military consultants there with us, and so we're like, if anything goes wrong, he's the guy that's going to have to answer for it, right? So the first day that we were recording in Seattle, we ended up doing these explosion recordings. I'm just going to show you a quick video that they put together after we finish this, so you can kind of get a flavor of what we were doing that day. The Seattle guys take credit for it, even though we funded it and set the whole thing up, but whatever. All right, let me talk really quick about our approach to recording these explosions, because this stuff did make it into the game, and we got some pretty positive feedback from the community on it. As is tannerite, we used an AR-15 to detonate it. We were trying to get as many variations on the explosions as possible, so we did kind of different configurations. We like tied, the explosives to a can of gas. We buried it underground. We put it in a 50-gallon drum, to try to get different kind of like character to each explosion. We recorded it at 192 kilohertz, 32 bits, so it's ultra high sample rate. And the reason that we were doing that was so that we could actually slow it down, because these explosions weren't as big as obviously like artillery explosions. Because if we were setting those off, then we would all be killed and our equipment would be destroyed. So this is a kind of a sound designer's trick, is to record smaller things at ultra high sample rates, and then slow them down. So you end up with still a high sample rate recording, like CD quality, but it's like stretched out, and you're not hearing that artifact that you get when you slow down a normal recording. And then after that, we compress that and put it into the game that way. We set up, instead of just pointing mics at the explosion and running with it, we set up an array of mics going out to relatively vast distances. We had 2 dynamic mics that were close up that captured the first kind of report, initial attack, and the big bass of getting punched by it. And I've got audio examples of each mic that I'll break down. I'll kind of deconstruct the explosion for you. The medium range mic we put down in a valley about 100 meters away, and it was actually pointed away from the explosion itself. So it was just picking up these kind of medium range reflections. And then we had another one that was actually a kilometer away. We had to go up a 4x4 trail to set the thing up. And we got up there and kind of just hit record and left it there for the rest of the day, and then came back and synchronized everything in post. So what you end up with is this close report, a medium report, and then this distant, epic 12-second long reverb trail of the explosion going out through this heavily wooded valley. So it's super ideal, right, to record in this kind of places, because you've got topographical changes and wood everywhere. If we did it in Illinois, maybe not so much, because the sound's gonna disperse and just go and be gone, because there's no hills or trees really to speak of. So I'm gonna take a look real quick at this, at some audio examples from that recording, just so you can kind of hear how we break down the actual explosion into components, and we mix those three sets of mics together basically at the end, and then you end up with a fully built explosion sound, as it were. So the first one I'm going to show is the close mic. This is just the ones that are pointed straight at. I'll play that again for you. Or not, sorry. Windows 10 is not cooperative. Okay, so there's your close one. Your medium one has a little bit more of a reverb tail. Here's your medium. And then far. This is my favorite one. We've lost audio completely in here. There it is. What happened? I had to wake it up. All right. So you can see it's just a really epic long reverb tail, right? So we go from that, we add in Foley of debris up close. So this is the earth falling back down. Man. Are you sure you want to play this file? Okay, we'll get to the piece de triumph here. The mix, here we go. And this is the final thing. This is our artillery hitting the ground near you on the Xbox One, Xbox mix. So there's your final mixed explosion sound, right? I think it turned out pretty cool. All right. We also recorded all new ambience. It was actually kind of getting really tired. I noticed, first in the release, there was a lot of shared ambient assets in the map, so I kind of started to get under my skin when I realized that the wind in Abbey is the same wind that's in Mountain Pass. And those are different places in the world. They should have different wind sounds, right? I mean, everything around you affects how things sound. So we went out to try to build the biggest kind of table of ambient assets that we could. That some things get shared, some things are unique specifically to maps, but we wanted to make sure that each map had its totally unique soundscape, right? Not just kind of canned loop playing in the background. So we populate the map with all these different elements here. The grass, which is a really big thing that I know the art guys are going to talk about, is our HD grass. So we've got many takes of wind blowing through grass that fade in and out based on where you are on the map. If you're near the grass, you get to hear it. It's cool. So like in each map, like I said, has its own kind of set of loops that get used. When we were recording this stuff, I was like really keen on getting a bunch of different running water sounds, and I did, and they actually worked out really well. Like we got some epic waterfall recordings in Washington as well. There was this one stream though, and I'm going to just tell this story really quick because these chicken sounds totally made it into the game, and it was totally unintended. Because this picture here is where the house that we were staying at when we were doing all this recording stuff. It was on like 100 acres of land in Carnation, Washington, in the foothills of the mountains. And there was a chicken coop there, and the chickens were generally pretty well behaved. And this one day I was out, trying to record streams, and I found this really nice sounding seasonal stream. So there were like, kind of like, it was running down a hill, and there was like leaves and branches and stuff in there, and it made it sound it was just a lively sounding stream. I'm like, I'm gonna take that stream, and that's gonna be the stream that's at the bottom of the valley in El Haluf, right? I can hear it, like as soon as I hear it through my microphone, because I'm walking around, listening to the world through the microphone and headphones, which makes everything sound way better. Microphones interpret sound way better than our ears do, any day. So I found this stream, and like the instant I start trying to get a 10-second loop of the stream, the chickens down the hill just start freaking out and ruining every take that I try to get of the stream. And they just wouldn't stop. I'm like, all I need is like 10 seconds of no chickens so that I can get the stream. And I have the audio snippet of me, and I kind of slammed it so that you can hear the stream that I'm trying to record on the chickens that like just won't stop.
Oh, shut up, chicken. Okay, here's another spot.
So you get the idea.
Between the chickens.
They didn't even finish that one.
There you go.
Okay, so you get the idea. Chickens were unrelenting. So like at this point, I'm like, I have to give up on this. I'm gonna have to come back later when the chickens aren't as excited and get the stream. But as long as they're over there going nuts, I might as well go record the chickens, because it's like, it was really quiet. There was no wind. There was no distant traffic or planes. I'm like, I can get some really nice isolated chicken sounds right now. And as long as it's there, you might as well get it, So I went up to the chickens and stuck the mic in their faces, and they just went nuts. They just kept going. I'm just sitting there pointing a mic right at these chickens, right? That's Nugget. That was the older rooster. So anyways, I ended up taking that stuff and putting it into the game, because I'm like, we've got farms all over the place, but there's no like farm animals. I know, but maybe you'd be hearing them in the distance. And sadly, as you can see here, Nugget, the chicken that I recorded, the tired sounding chicken, didn't make it. The day after I recorded him, a fox got into the coop, and Nugget met his maker. But Nugget made it into the game. So Nugget lives on. Nugget lives on, and if you hang out at any of the farms in any of our European maps, for a little while, you'll hear Nugget off in the distance. As long as nobody's shooting at you, because then that sidechain compression will be ducking Nugget. But anyways, it was a hilarious kind of like happenstance where the chicken would have never made it into the game, but the fact that they presented themselves while we were recording for the game, they kind of strong-armed their way in. Here's a couple photos from that trip. I mentioned Snoqualmie Falls, a big famous waterfall that actually made it into Pearl River. I believe there's a waterfall in one of the corners. If you go find one of the corners of the map, you can hear that waterfall off in the distance. We went to Belarus last September as a part of kind of an audio summit. We were just kind of doing a meet and greet, kind of putting our heads together with the Eastern European audio team, because there's actually kind of a vast group of people working on audio over at the Minsk studio. So I'm going to show you, it was interesting because they basically, did this meet and greet. It was kind of a really bizarre experience because, I've never been to Eastern Europe, so it was like kind of an eye-opener, really exciting. It's actually a lot like I thought it was going to be. Lots of military hardware everywhere, lots of really interesting architecture, old Soviet cars still on the road, stuff like that. And I shot some phone video of that experience, and I'll show you that real quick. It was pretty cool because they took us out to this spot called Stalin's Line, which is basically this big, it was one of the big tank battle fronts between the Nazis and the Soviets. It's basically where they first started clashing. Minsk got pretty much destroyed during this time. So like there's still a lot of old like wrecked tank chassis and military hardware out there, and they've got this military complex kind of like this, but a little bit more serious because the equipment still works, and they had like a nuclear warhead sitting out that was like, you know, just kind of over there. It's Belarus. It's a different place. Anyways, I'll show you this video real quick. It's just a couple of the snips from us pulling into the military complex and the tanks that we got to work with. Those are Belarusian army guys getting the tank ready to go for us. I also want to mention that this tank was actually in pretty questionable condition. There were definitely like holes from ballistics in it. There had been like some substantial damage to the underside of the hull. The gearbox was really bad, and the engine actually failed at the end of the day while we were in it, and like the whole thing filled up with smoke. If you listen to the engine on the T-55, it sounds like there's a bunch of nuts and bolts like rattling around there. It's like one of the worst sounding diesels I've ever heard in my life. You can see him kind of struggle to find second gear here too. Somewhere. I'm just gonna let this play out so that you guys can hear the what's left of this engine shutting down when it kills the ignition after they back it up, because it sounds ridiculous. Sounding good. Okay, so it was kind of interesting too, because I did get to record another T-55 after that, and it wasn't just that T-55 sounded like that. That's what they actually sound like. I guess their tolerances were a little bit lower when they were putting these things together back in the late 40s. Here's a couple other photos from that trip. Steven, the audio producer there from Seattle, with the medium range ballistic missile. It was like a 3, I don't remember exactly, that's why I put 3+. It was like 3.7 megaton nuclear warhead on that thing. I was joking with the guys too, because I'm like, is this the one for New York or Chicago? What's the deal, guys? They're like, no, that one's for London. Like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, we got some cool Foley, impact Foleys. We were like taking parts of tanks and slamming them up against other parts of tanks, and that stuff we got into our game now. I actually mixed some of these sounds with slowed down ricochets of 22s, subsonic 22s, because those are like really easy to record because the report, like you can isolate the actual ricochet, and then you slow that down, and it sounds like a massive round bouncing off of stuff. And that's actually where the ricochet sounds came from in World of Tanks on the consoles. And there's a couple of the dudes from the PC team doing their thing, working on that. That was pretty muddy that day, but it was not as muddy as the tanks that we recorded in Minnesota for the Xbox One. So the PC guys actually have done like some pretty substantial recording of tanks. They've got a library. They've recorded like 27 historical tanks. They have a kind of different approach to how they place microphones and mix their tanks than we do. I have a little bit more of a musical approach to it, I guess you could say. And they use all condenser microphones. I use some dynamic microphones to get more bass content. Just because the fidelity of the tank kind of gets buried with all the other game events in there, and I kind of wanted it to sound like a tank but sound sweet, also not just like realistic, because as you heard earlier, like with the Abbot turning, if I made it realistic, you wouldn't be able to hear anything happening in the game. Every time you turned, it would be like nails on chalkboard, and so we kind of take the best takes of the performance of the tank driving and kind of mix those all down into these loops that get used at runtime in the game. Which I mentioned before, we did a big recording project just in March, and this was like the last capture that we did for the Xbox One content that was released just last month. It was 3 days outdoors. We did 5 tanks listed here. We did the Sherman, which was pretty exciting and awesome because the Sherman that this guy had was like in really pristine condition. There were like a couple dimples in the side from like rifle shots, I guess, but other than that, it was like perfect. And for a 70-year-old vehicle, it was pretty remarkable to like have it fully functioning in the state that it was in. I have another video I can show you guys. It's kind of a montage. Oh wait, never mind. I don't have a video for this. Sorry. I have some videos of the individual tanks that we'll look at of the actual recording process. So as I mentioned, the PC guys use entirely condenser mics and everything. I don't want to geek out too much on technical specifications, but we ended up using dynamic mics on the 2 dynamic mics, one on the engine, one on the exhaust. The dynamic mic we used on the engine, this was my idea, was to use an Audix D6, which is a bass drum microphone. It has extremely vibrant bass response. And I ended up using that mic specifically to channel the engine performances to the subwoofer for 5.1 mixes. As opposed to just sending the whole program material of the tank sound, we actually have an isolated, specific microphone that is for the subwoofer. Other than that, we used some shotgun mics, which are super directional on the tracks, so that we could kind of isolate the tracks from the engine noises. That way we can use track sounds and engine sounds from different tanks on the same tank in the game, because we have a very limited amount of storage and memory to work with on the consoles. Unlike the PC guys, we have to fit it into a download that is acceptable to you guys, acceptable to Microsoft, and stuff that can be loaded into the very small amount of memory that consoles have compared to PCs. It takes 3 dudes to record the tank. It takes about an hour to set it up. We kind of worked out how this whole thing was going to work before we got there, so that we weren't just sitting there burning cash, driving around in tanks, trying to figure out how to make good sounding recordings out of them. We need obviously someone who's listening to the whole thing while it's being done on isolated, nice, high quality headphones. That was the position that I filled on this. The assistant engineer is on the outside of the tank, sitting in the commander's position, keeping eyes on all the gear that is strapped to the tank, because it's not like massive amount of money, but it's like $15,000 worth of stuff. And when it's strapped to the outside of a tank and you're driving it around in the outdoors, there's like a strong possibility that it would break. Even if it's very ruggedly built audio equipment, it cannot compete with tanks, obviously. And then the co-driver is actually kind of calling the shots, as it were, because they're not listening to anything or looking at anything. Co-driver has a list of all the maneuvers we need. So instead of just randomly driving around, we say we need the tank to drive slow in a straight line for at least 30 seconds with a pretty consistent RPM. That way we can cut a 10-second loop out of it and then layer up slow, medium, fast loops, interpolate between those, and pitch modulate them at runtime, just because, depending on how much you use your analog stick to move forward. I have some deconstructed audio examples of those mics on those tanks. And I think it's pretty cool. So let me force you to listen to it. Okay, so this is, I mentioned that there's one microphone on the engine. On the exterior, another mic in the interior, that's the bass mic, the low frequency mic. There's an exhaust mic. There is individual mics on each track that are isolated as well. And I'm going to show you the full mix of all those right now, of just a Chieftain doing medium speed down the road, as it were. So there's where we're grabbing the loop, basically, for the game. We'll look for something in there that we can cut out that's totally smooth and repeatable so that we can modulate when you drive the tank. Cool. So, beyond that, we have another mic on the interior that is a stereo mic, which is, we can kind of switch between the exterior, interior when you go between first and third person views. And basically, since all these loops, these individual audio files are all synchronized, we can kind of snap to that moment in time inside the tank within that loop that we cut out. So I'll just play this real quick. You get to hear outside, it snaps to the interior. It's super clear. You'll definitely be able to hear, so you can hear the exact difference between what the outside and the inside of the tank sound like in real life. And I also wanted to mention that these mix downs are not, the stuff that's in the game has been multi-band compressed and EQ'd and polished, and it's slick. This is stuff that I just exported Friday afternoon. No EQ, just raw recordings straight off the mics that we had on the outside of the tank. So here's the exterior to interior. So there you go. If you ever wanted to know what it actually sounds like inside a tank, that's what it actually sounds like. And if it was realistic, it would be cacophonous and rattling pictures off of your wall if you had it coming at you like it was, like it sounds in the real thing. The first thing that we did when we went to record these tanks was to run some tests, get some levels set, and we did that in the cheapest possible tank-like vehicle that we could get our hands on, because it was the cheapest thing to run. As we were constantly reminded by the owner of these tanks, it's not like you can just go to the parts store and replace the starter if you need to. A lot of the stuff's kind of hard to find. So we're like, all right, we'll tread lightly. We're not going to just drive your Sherman around for the next 8 hours, like redlining it. So we used a relatively available and cheap APC FV432, which actually shares the same engine and chassis with the Abbot SPG. But we kind of just bombed around for a day on this, trying different mic configurations, mic placement, different level settings, like whether or not we were going to pad our preamps and more nerdy audio stuff. But you can see on this one, the track mics are right up at the front sprocket right there to get the contact between those. You can see over by the rear exhaust pipe that there's Sennheiser 421 on that. And there's other mics clipped to the exterior. They're all relatively small condenser mics. So this was cool. It was my second tank that I ever got to ride in, the T-55 in Belarus being the first one. There's me and Steven rigging some stuff up inside the APC. And if you look at the ceiling in there, you can actually see there's a ring above our heads kind of surrounding us, which is where the turret would go if this was an Abbot SPG. Because all they do is remove the plate steel from the top and just drop the turret right onto it and change the configuration of the interior. So they're pretty modular. I thought that was pretty neat. There's the Abbot SPG. as I mentioned, it was like clockwork. We were like watching the weather in Minnesota. This is the end of March, so it's supposed to be spring, right? But yeah, it's Minnesota, so no way. It snowed every day that we were there. It was like below freezing most of the time. And like I think the week prior to this, it had been like 75 degrees or something too. So it's like, just the way it worked out. But we had to get it done, and we had no more time to do it before we were like in that home stretch of development, where we just didn't have a lot of time left. So this one was pretty cool because they were like really willing to thrash this thing. We like got really super nuts. Like we were doing a hard braking. We were doing it hard braking at one point, and we actually got it to like kind of tip forward onto like, how the tracks are angled at the front. Let's see if I can. I don't have any profile shots of it, but you can see how the tracks are angled. You can see on this one actually. Here we go. If this will cooperate. There you go. Yeah, how the tracks are angled up at the front. We were braking like so hard that the whole chassis would tip up onto the front sprockets. And that was pretty hilarious. The guy that was driving was not the owner. He was like one of the employees of this place. And I know he ended up getting, I think there was some disciplinary action involved because of the way that we were driving the Abbot. But again, it was like one of their cheapest vehicles to run, so like I didn't feel too bad about it. And we paid thousands and thousands of dollars to have access to these things to record. They sawed off the breech of the main gun on that Abbot. I thought it was pretty cool. You could see where the cut marks are there from the plasma cutter. And other than that, the gun was pretty much intact. Like the rifling was still in really good shape. There were ammo racks everywhere in there. And I got another video, lots of multimedia here. I'm an audio video guy, of us kind of rolling around in that thing, getting some cool. There we go. Cool. No, actually, the guy was like pretty cool about letting us just leave that stuff. I assume they he's got staff to handle that kind of stuff, I guess. Ooh, no. Okay. Here's one that was actually here's a tank that's actually physically in the game, and it was like obviously very popular around this time because Fury came out, and this is the exact same tank from Fury. And as I mentioned before, it was in like really super pristine condition. I feel kind of bad about it because we really did kind of get super muddy on this run because I think it had snowed like 6 inches the night before or something. So anyways, it was pretty cool. There's us bringing up the exhaust mic, which got really super thrashed on this one. There's Steven loving the Minnesota weather, as he is a Texas native. One thing that that really struck me immediately upon getting in there, sitting in the radio man position there, is that there's like zero room inside this thing. I'm 6'1". I think I might be like just at the limit of how tall you can be in the U.S. Army to be an armor crewman. And there's just no room at all in there to like maneuver, and there's definitely not enough room to like lounge around and show off your ripped abs if you're Brad Pitt. So they clearly built like a double scale interior set for that to shoot all their interior shots, because there's no way to kind of shimmy around in there. Even like going from the turret down into the driver's area is like, there's a pretty, I don't think I could easily fit through there. I'll just put it that way. So it's very, very cramped inside. And you're also really high up. That was the other thing that was like pretty cool about it. So let me show you a video. So I've got video of that process as well, the Sherman doing its thing. All right. Yeah, that thing was pretty cool. Oddly enough, though, actually, when we like went back and listened to it, that engine was like the least pleasing sounding. It had like the least character. It just kind of had the Detroit whine. This like constant, it sounded like a bulldozer. It didn't really sound that pretty. But the lower RPM like revving stuff sounds pretty good. So we ended up getting a pretty good mix out of it. But as far as like the way that tanks sound in the world, that was like kind of one of my least favorites. I still think the T-55 is the best because you can just hear it destroying itself while it runs. The Chieftain, we did the FE-4201 Mark 11 Chieftain, which is a more modern tank than we have in our game, but the source material is really good, and I know that there are other projects at Wargaming ongoing right now that can use this kind of stuff, so we captured it while we were there. Really nice. It was a kind of a step up, to a more modern tank. It's like, wow, this transmission actually works. This engine starts every time. It goes quick. It shifts gears when it's supposed to, and you can go fast and stop fast in it. And it was also not as loud as a lot of the other tanks. Like the T-55 would like redline our meters. Even with our gain turned all the way down, we had to pad the channels. Like the sound of it in reality is so loud that it overloads your microphones, pretty much, is the deal. The other interesting note about this tank was that it is the actual tank that was in the movie Reign of Fire. Which is kind of, it's like an absurd paradox, the whole thing. Because in the movie, they welded a bracket, a mount on for a machine gun where it would be if it was an Abrams. And then in the movie, they call it an Abrams, and they say that they flew it over from the United States, even though it's a Chieftain. And they shot this movie in the UK. So like, I don't know what their logic was behind that. So inverse from the fantasy of Reign of Fire, the Chieftain was purchased in the UK and then flown over here. And now it lives in Minnesota in this guy's garage at Drive a Tank, which is, I'll give them a drop. I'll drop their name here, driveatank.com. If you've got an extra $3,000 or $4,000 laying around, you can go drive any one of these tanks for like 10 or 15 minutes tops. So it's really, I think it's a business that's like, it provides like really unique opportunities for people that have the money to do it. I think they do APC packages and packages with the Abbot for like a little bit more reasonable, hundreds of dollars, less than $1,000. So if you want to go to rural Minnesota for a weekend, that's a fun activity that you can do there. One of the few, I'm sure, unless you're into hunting and fishing, I guess. Yep, there's me hanging out. There's a little Radio Man's hatch, which was actually blocked by that fake machine gun that they put on it for the movie that they ended up having to cut off when they brought it over here. So this particular Chieftain has like kind of some sort of identity crisis because he's flying an American flag off of it there. I've got about 15 minutes left here, so I can show you guys like real quick video of the Chieftain and then open it up to some questions. And I don't think we got as much exterior footage of this thing blasting, but you get to see operating stuff of the interior and some footage from the outside of it while we were driving it. Saw it coming. All right. Yeah, that's about all I've got. I've got a little bit more behind the scenes stuff of us recording the T55, but you already saw T55 earlier. So I'd like to open it up to questions. If you guys have any questions about tanks or sound, go ahead. Oh man, favorite audio recording project. And we'll try to keep this in the realm of just sound effects and not music. To be honest, this tank recording thing was like pretty much the most focused and awesome thing I've ever had the chance to be a part of. This equipment is not accessible, you know, and I got access to it. So it was kind of it was go time for me. You know, it's like, all right, here's 20 years of audio experience, and you get one shot to record this thing, and we're not going to start it more than 5 times for you. And I need to get 5 startup recordings. So it was a challenge, but there was just like a lot of planning went into it. We started planning it, and it was like maybe 7 or 8 months from when we initially contacted the Drive a Tank guys and like to going there and actually doing it. The explosions were fun. We're probably going to go do a big ballistics, like big gun, artillery, and tank gun cannon recording pretty much thing. Hopefully in the next few months. We've got Nick is actually setting us up with the guys to do that because he's the kind of guy that has friends like that. I can hook you up with like a discount on a guitar maybe, but Chieftain can get you a cannon. But yeah, the tanks were the most exciting thing that I think I've ever done in my career. Back here?
Why'd you decide to cut your beard? It looks like it took a couple of years to grow that.
It did. It took 2 years to grow out. The question was, why did I cut my long beard? I'll tell you why. A friend of mine moved to Hawaii a couple years ago and bought a house, and I just went there for 10 days this spring in May, and the deal was if I helped him redo his roof, that I could stay at the house for free for 10 days in Maui. So I got through about 2 hours of roofing in the midday sun in Hawaii, and I was like, the beard's got to go. That's it, end of story. And I just went straight down to like the drugstore and bought clippers and shaved it off, and I've been growing it back ever since. That was in late May. So this is the beard that I have to show for like the last 2.5 months. I think it's coming back pretty good. Right here. The question was, are there any plans to expand audio options, like user-controlled mix settings? Yes. The answer is yes. And we're testing a couple different options. One thing that I'm championing myself right now is to have different dynamic range settings. So you've got like high dynamic range, kind of TV speaker setting, and then the like low dynamic like midnight mode. That you don't have to use those, but it's like if you want your tank gun to sound massive and crazy loud, you choose the high dynamic range one. If you're playing quietly at night and you need to have your speakers turned down, you use the late one. And then as far as like exposing the faders, actual like volume faders, that's something that's like we have to like basically figure out how much control we want people to have, because we get complaints all the time like, oh, the VO doesn't work, there's a bug, the VO is gone, I can't hear the VO. And we're like, did you turn up the VO in your volume settings? Oh, that's it. My car won't start, it has no gas in it. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, we can expose that. That's something that, now that you mention it, I'll light a fire under it for you. Back here. That's a good question. The question was whether or not we have to worry about like the interplay between music and sound effects in the game. For us on the console, we're kind of cheating because there's no music during the actual gameplay. The PC game has music that gets played randomly, basically on a timer. I don't believe that their music system is tied to game events. It's just it's an aesthetic thing, and it's great. I love the soundtrack. We've got the same music as them. Our garage music is different, which we just updated. I don't know if anybody here noticed that, but it was the guy who did the original music for Fallout and Fallout 2 did our new garage music. He's a really cool, like 65-year-old surfer dude from Malibu, and he used to play keyboards in Jefferson Starship, and now he makes like really wicked ambient music, and I thought it worked out pretty good. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, the question was about where the gun sounds are sourced from and how they get assigned to different cannons. That's a good question. Since there's over 700 tanks in our game, we don't have 700 gun sounds. We don't have 700 engine sounds. The gun sounds are authored from a mixture of like field recorded artillery stuff that the PC guys have done and sound effects library content. And that's part of the reason that we're looking at going and recording our own, because we want to get to the point where every sound in the game was recorded by Wargaming, period. We don't share sounds with anyone else. So you won't hear our gun sounds in a Pepsi commercial or something, So it's that the gun sounds themselves have been crafted like how you would make sound effects for a film. It's a combination of different recordings from different sources that are put through some magical Pro Tools plugins and come out sounding massive. And we've broken them down into, I wish I had the exact numbers, but if something around like 50 different gun sounds, and they are assigned to the guns procedurally based on data from the game. So all the data, the data that Chieftain collects, that's all stored in tables, basically in databases, and we can say we've got 50 gun sounds. Here's the corresponding calibers and nations that they go to, and then we programmatically, basically assign those to the individual gun objects in the game. And the same goes with engines as well. Engines are a little bit different because there's even fewer engine sounds, but depending on the displacement of the engine, the fuel type, it gets assigned to an appropriate tank. And then beyond that, there's real-time processing applied to those with like notch filtering, EQ, some phase adjustment, stuff like that, so that you get a unique sound experience with each tank. They all just don't sound the same. So there's maths. I have to get other engineers involved, real engineers, not audio engineers. Way in the back. Okay, we did tear through some gear. We didn't lose any mics, though. The mics were all good, and the cables were all good. I actually I found the best mic clamp that I could find is made by a company called K&M. They're made in Germany, so it's like not Chinesium, It's like real metal that was like made by somebody with a college degree. And so they're like solid, because like a lot of the hardware that you get like from music suppliers are usually like really crappy metal that just break. You've probably been to rock concerts and seen people fumbling around with mic stands because they're falling apart, and it's because they use crappy pot metal to make that stuff. So I got the strongest one that I could, and that one got completely broken in half on the Chieftain, but it has a 5-year unlimited warranty, so I sent it back. And I'm like, this thing sucks, it broke during normal use. And they sent me a replacement out. So other than that, we tore through some windscreens, but those things cost like between $30 and $80 each, and that's just kind of the cost of doing business when we're working with heavy equipment like this. I mean, the tanks aren't. The tank is the opposite of a piece of construction equipment, right? It's a piece of deconstruction equipment. It's designed to unconstruct things, other tanks, buildings, whatever, So it kind of comes with the territory that something's going to break, I think, when you're dealing with equipment this heavy, Anyone else? Blue shirt back here. The Churchill sound on the Xbox. Is the Churchill sound on the Xbox unique? The Churchill sound on the Xbox, and I'm not off the top of my head remembering because there's over 700 tanks and there's only so much storage space up here. It uses one of the shared tank sound packs, right? So we have different idle sounds, different running sounds, different track sounds, and depending on the tank, those sounds get assigned to those objects on that tank. So it'll pull in its own set of engine sounds that will be modified in a way that is unique to that tank. But it's not unique to that tank in the sense that the wave data is unique. It uses a shared pool of engine sounds with the other tanks, if that answers your question. And the reason is, I mean, as much as I'd love to record 700 tanks and put them into the game, we have to manage download size, and we have a limited amount of memory on the console, so we just can't have tons and tons of variety. Right here, do we use other games for the sounds? You mean, do we kind of compare ourselves against them? I mean, I think anyone who works in game development or the music industry or the TV industry will tell you yes. That they look at everything. This is our competition, right? We have to know what they're doing. And in a creative community, I don't feel, as a sound guy, that I'm competing against other sound designers. I feel like we're all kind of working in this homogenous, hippie-ish creative community where we all feed off of each other's strengths and improve player experiences for everyone, regardless of what game they're playing, you know? So yeah, I definitely listen to other games and take notes from them, but I also try to make things as unique as possible to make our product stand out. Oh wait, over here. Yes? Nick was pointing, so I'm following orders here. Yes. Well, if you listen to our game, we're actually pretty squeaky now with the latest update. And this is, it's one of those things where we got some feedback. It's like, oh, it's too squeaky. But as you have, I've proven at this point that that's what a tank sounds like, right? So what we did, like I said, is we tried to find like kind of moments where it wasn't super squeaky, and we shifted things around in such a way that, you know, we ended up with something that's adequately squeaky, but not overwhelmingly squeaky to the point where it's like rage-inducing to listen to. I think I'm out of time. I'm being yelled at here. So thank you guys for coming out today. Thank you for listening. I love you guys. Thank you for being here.